The next logical thing to do in our time series is to draw a line that connects all of our time points. Now let's take a look at the SVG specification for drawing lines, which are referred to as paths in SVG. So here at w3.org, I've looked up the path specification, and we'll take a look at this element here called path. Now, what makes paths different than other kinds of elements in SVG is that they have this attribute D, and the value for D is this sort of cryptic letter and number combination, which denotes how a path is drawn on the screen. And really, you can imagine that if you had a pen or a pencil and you put your hand on the screen, you would be telling your hand, okay, move this many pixels to the left, this many pixels down. I won't go into the details of what each of these letters means. Okay, so we'll go back to the web page. And so in D3, we luckily have a line generator, or really it's a path generator, but the way in which we'll handle the data will be just a bit different than when we handle data for other elements that we've used so far, such as the rectangle element or the circle element. Now let's head to the code, and we'll scroll down to just below the creation of our y-axis. And what we're going to do is create a function that will create a line. So on a new line, and line and path are synonymous here. I'll more often refer to it as line, but technically we're creating a path element. So we'll type var and line equals d3.svg.line and open and close parentheses. Now, because it's the SVG portion of the D3 library, we can expect that this is actually creating for us a path generator. The first argument is the function to use in order to set the x portion of the line, and the next is the y portion. For the x values, we'll be using a function that has an argument d, and we'll open and close curly brackets. And remember that the x is our time, so var date equals date parser. And we'll pass d.date, and then we'll be returning the value for date, but not just that, it is passed into our scaling function. Okay, and then for y, a function d, and then our curly brackets, and we'll return y parentheses d dot value. This is all well and good, but now we actually have to use this line generating function within our custom plot function. Just like we did with the data points, with the appending of circles, we'll want to treat paths pretty much the same. We'll create the data binding at enter and then update the path, and then when we're done, we'll remove any unbound elements from the path. Except that the path doesn't have elements, instead we're generating that string for the path. So this is where it gets to be just a tad complicated. Remember, the draw order in terms of stacking is determined on what gets drawn first earlier in the code or later in the code. So if we want our line to appear underneath the points, then write the code before the points are created. If we want it to be drawn on top of the points, we'll write the code so that it is after the points are created. Here, I want it to be underneath because I still want to see the points. This dot select all, and what we're going to do is select any element that has the class trendline. And just as we do with class of point, we'll set the data source. So data params.data, denote the interface, and then we're going to append a path element. And let's remember to give this the class of trendline, and the second argument set to true. We'll put a semicolon at the end, and now we'll move to the update phase. So just before the updating of the point class, this dot select all, and we want all of the elements that are classed as trendline. And what we'll do here is we'll set the attribute d, and we saw that in the W3 page that we looked at earlier, and we'll use a function, and we'll pass in d, and we'll want to return the line function with d passed within it. Save that, and now we'll head down to the exit portion, and just before the removal of the points, this dot select all, and again we're selecting trendline. The data is params.data, and exit and remove. Save this, head to the web page and refresh, and I don't see a line. What I've done is I've created the line much in the way that you'll try to create it the first time. And you see lines in D3 are deceptive because you'll use the same data source with your line generator, But there's a small catch. You see, if we go back to the paths tab here where I have the W3 specification, the path is one continuous string. It's not a set of different path elements that then create a path. But you see, when we're binding to data, we've had separate elements for each piece of data. So what we need to do, we'll go back to the code and let's go to the interface. And where we denoted the data source here, we are going to take this data source and we're going to enclose it within an array. There's a single index array, and that array is going through with the line generator in order to generate a very long string that is then used for the D attribute in the update. And we also need to do this within the exit portion as well. So we need to wrap this in brackets. Save it and head to the web page, refresh. And now you can see that we have drawn a path that goes from the start of our data to the end. And if we take a look at this, we'll click the magnifying glass and let's click path trend line. You can see at the bottom, there's this really long string that was created. We can scroll over. And that is the string that was created with our line generating function. See, that's a single path element with a D attribute that has a giant string. Let's click console. We don't need that anymore. The last thing that we need to do is set some CSS styling because by default, this path is closing in on itself and it has a fill. So let's go back to the code. All right, we'll head to main.css and at the bottom of the page, .trendline, open and close curly brackets. We don't want a fill, so fill is set to none. We want a stroke that's a light gray, and the stroke width will be the same as the width of a circle. So stroke width, and because the width of the circle is 4 pixels, we'll set this to 4 pixels. Save that, head to the web page and refresh, and we have a really attractive looking path now. So paths can be a bit tricky to initially implement in D3 because they're different from the way in which data is drawn with other data points. Before, every element is bound to a specific piece of data, but with a path, we go through a collection of data, put it through a line generating function, and then return a big string that denotes how a line is to be drawn. And if we take a look at the code, head to index.html, the key to doing that is to take the collection of data, which is params.data, and to wrap it within an array so that it is treated as one giant collection at once. And we do that within the enter phase and within the exit phase. And by drawing the line the same way that we did with the points, if we update our data, the line will update as well because the D attribute of the line is being updated in the update portion.